Hey gang, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and thanks a lot for checking out the video from here in a parking garage in Kansas City, Missouri. My sister lives just up here north of Kansas City, and we brought the boys up here to stay with them for the weekend. And Kim and I spent the night here in Kansas City, so dragging a little bit this morning, but wanted to get the video out. So anyway, guys, we're going to be talking about what I've learned from crappie fishing, and specifically what this 90-year-old man and my dad taught me about crappie fishing that has really helped me out to catch more bass, especially flipping and pitching, as far as what I've learned from crappie through this technique that I've applied directly to bass. So we're going to get into that a little bit here. So what the deal was, and I think I told this or alluded to this story about 3 years ago when I started the channel, but it's such a good story that I wanted to relate it again because it'll really help you guys catch more flipping and pitching fish for sure. But anyway, what the deal was is my mom and dad, they had a trailer house down there at Grand Lake for like 30 years, and in the resort, where the little trailer resort was, the resort had its own dock, like a crappie fishing dock. It was a heated dock, one of the old-time heated docks on Grand Lake. And also one of our friends had a dock just in the cove a few docks down from the heated dock. So we were always crappie fishing down there. You know, we'd go down if it was cold in the heated dock, and then when it was warmer, Dad and I'd fish off our friend's dock for crappie. And you know, they had brush hanging off the side of the dock, so we'd go down there and we just fish vertical around this brush that they put off the docks there. So anyway, I got noticing there was this one old dude named Lawrence that he was probably, this was like in 1975. This dude was still like 90 years old in 1975. World War I veteran, I'll tell you anything. But anyway, Lawrence he'd be in there crappie fishing in that heated dock 24/7. You'd go, I don't care when you'd go down there, Lawrence would be down there crappie fishing. And he always caught more crappie than anyone else, and he didn't throw nothing back. I mean, if it was this long, he'd flay it out of crappie. But anyway, I got studying Lawrence, why he caught so many fish, and then I also got studying my dad, why he caught so many more crappie than anyone else. And I started noticing, it's like when they were crappie fishing, you know, they'd put their crappie jig down vertical in the water, and they just dab it up a couple times like that. Most of them would like use their finger like to give it action like that. You know, the crappie jig was probably in anywhere between 6 to 10 foot down right under the dock, but they'd jig it a few times and then they'd reel it in, and they'd move the jig like 2 inches one side. It's not like they pulled the jig out and tried to put it in a different spot a couple feet away. They'd reel it in and they just move it like 2 to 3 inches at a time. They'd drop it down there, they'd start shaking it around like that. If they didn't get a bite, they'd reel it in and move it another 2 inches. And I watched them do this specifically when they're fishing around brush. So I got thinking, and I wasn't catching much, so because I'd flip it in there, you know, I'd jig it a couple times, and then I'd walk 3 or 4 feet down the dock and try a different spot. I just didn't think there was any crappie there. But they, like I said, they'd catch them doing that. So I started thinking about it over the years about, you know, if that works with crappie, flipping, you know, if you're fishing vertical with jigs and crappie, why wouldn't bass react the same? As far as if you're, if you're flipping a brush pile or flipping a bush or something like that, why not try that? So what I started doing is when I was flipping for bass, flipping a jig or flipping a worm or something in a lay down tree or a flooded bush or something like that, I started doing just what Lawrence and Dad did. I'd pitch it in there, I'd work it a few times, I'd reel it in, and I'd make my next flip just inches away from there. And I would systematically break down that tree or that bush where there was no stone unturned. And that's how, guys, that's how I made a living fishing. That's how I was able to fish full time for over 30 years, because the fish that I caught flipping from that technique that we learned from crappie fishing allowed me to catch simply more fish than anyone else except Tommy Biffle and Denny Brower back in the day flipping and pitching. But one of the reasons I think this works good is like when you flip or pitch in a bush or a lay down tree, you don't really know how those fish are positioned down there, because there's limbs underneath the water that you don't know where they're at, and the bass will position in relationship to those limbs. So if you put your jig or your creature bait or whatever down in the center of a bush down there, there may be a bass within inches of it, but you simply didn't generate that reaction strike, because when you put that bait down there, you may have dropped it on the fish's tail, and that fish is not going to whip around a lot of times and get that. But then you move it a couple inches, and then you start getting it closer, and then eventually you may put it right around his head, and just out of reaction strike, that fish is going to bite that jig or that creature bait or something like that. But the point of the video, guys, is when you're pitching and flipping, go slow, not necessarily work your bait slow, but when you're moving your bait around the structure, don't move it a couple feet at a time. Just move it within inches, and like I said, methodically cover that area, and just sort of picture down there about these fish being positioned in certain ways. And if you don't put that jig or that creature bait or whatever right in front of their nose, they're not going to bite it. So anyway, just another tip I learned from the old dudes, guys. Hope it helps you out. We'll talk later.